Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast, your source for insights and ideas on how to lead your church into the 21st century. At the Future Christian Podcast, we talk to pastors, authors, and other faith leaders for helpful advice and practical wisdom to help you and your community of faith walk boldly into the future. Now, here's your host, Lauren Richmond Jr.
Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast. Today, Martha Tatarnic welcomes Michael John Pryse to the show. Bishop Pryse leads the Eastern Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada. He attended Eastwood Collegiate and earned a Bachelor of Arts in History and English from Wilfrid Laurier University, followed by a Master of Divinity from Waterloo Lutheran Seminary in 1985. Ordained on June 7, 1985, he served as a pastor in various Ontario communities and later as assistant to the Bishop of Eastern Synod. In 1998, he was elected Bishop of the Eastern Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada. Bishop Pryse is a strong advocate for Christian unity and ecumenical cooperation. He co-chaired the Joint Anglican Lutheran Commission and the Anglican Lutheran International Coordinating Committee. He has participated in numerous ecumenical and multi-faith delegations worldwide. Inspired by his grandfather's ministry among the Six Nations, peoples, and his own adoption experience, Bishop Pryse is committed to breaking down divisions within the human family. He has traveled extensively to support global justice, human rights, and inclusivity. He was awarded an honorary Doctor of Divinity by Wilfrid Laurier University in 2011 for his leadership in public, ecumenical, and multi-faith areas. Bishop Pryse and his wife Lois have 4 adult daughters and 9 grandchildren and live in Kitchener, Ontario. One more thing, please take a moment to leave a review on whatever podcast app you're listening on and share this episode with a friend. We hope this episode helps you lead your church into the future.
Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast. I am your host for the summer season, Martha Tatarnic. And today I am so pleased to be having a conversation with Bishop Michael Pryse of the Evangelical Lutheran Church here in Canada. Welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's really great to connect with you. We worked together way back in the day when I was serving in an Anglican Lutheran church, and I had the privilege of calling you one of my bishops. I had a number of bishops back then.
One can have too many bishops.
Did you say one can or can't? Can. Yeah, I think there's probably a limit, maybe.
Those were great days, Martha.
Yeah, well, you weren't the straw that broke the camel's back. So it was definitely a privilege serving with you. And I'm really excited to talk to you today. So we're going to get into some opening questions before we get into the meat of the conversation that I'm hoping that we'll have. But just to give our listeners some context, can you just share with us, for starters, what kind of faith tradition were you raised in? What was your upbringing in faith like?
So I was, my birth mother was an Anglican. And shortly after my birth, I was placed for adoption. I was in intermediate care for a couple of years. And then at age 2, I was adopted by a Lutheran family in Kitchener, Ontario. And they were active in the life of the church, and hence I was as well. But it was a little more of an ecumenical piece. My dad was raised as a Baptist, and his father and his grandfather were Baptist ministers. And so my grandpa was a Baptist minister who did most of his ministry at Oswego on the Six Nations. So we would often visit them there and attend church there with them. So, but yeah, it was a churched background.
A churched background, and you were kind of set up for the possibility of continuing on that pastoring legacy, I guess.
Yeah, it wasn't something I was looking to do.
Well, I think that's the case for most of us, right? We're kind of doing something else before I get swallowed into the belly of the
faith
whale.
really got awakened through experiences in open ministry, church camps. I ended up going to one as a kid, and then I became a staff member, and then I became director. And it just awakened me to an expanded idea of the faith as something that really dealt with questions of engagement in real life with real people in a real world. And that wouldn't have been part of my understanding of what church was. I was growing up. So it awakened me, and I encountered people whose lives and lifestyles I really admired, and I wanted to know more about that. And I think that's how I started to get sucked down the vocational route.
And like, you were quite young when
I was I was ordained. I was 24 years old when I was ordained as a pastor. Yeah.
Yeah, that's young. That's young. I was 25. It's right out of seminary.
Like, I see pictures from back then. My God, I was a baby.
I know, but I don't know about you, but I thought I knew everything.
I did, until I saw the moving truck moving away from that first rectory part. And I said, I don't know, how are you for language on this? And I said to my wife, holy shit, I'm the pastor of this place now. What am I supposed to do? So I was scared at the start.
Yeah, it's fear and trembling for sure. So how have you, you've kind of touched on this already, but how has being a Christian changed for you from the time that you were a child to now? I'm sure there's been lots of changes.
Well, I guess my first experiences of church were that, it was a place that you went to. It was a part of the rhythm of every week, like you went to church. And as I said earlier, as I got into my mid and later teens, I realized, holy smokes, like this, being a part of the church can be something that actually impacts and guides the way that I live my life and the way I experience my life and the way I experience the world. And that was like so formative for me. And so it became less about something, a place where one went, to something that one could be a part of. And and I guess I would hope that sense of being a part of something and engaging something in the world, that it's grown and become more mature and expanded, in that intervening years.
Yeah, well, and I do want to get into that more in depth, because that, spoiler alert, is really why I've invited you to be on the podcast, is to delve into your particular vantage point of serving as a bishop of the church for the length of time that you have, and how you have negotiated change as a leader in the church. So let's put a little pin in that and come back to that. And I just have one more opening question as we lay the groundwork here. Is there a spiritual practice that you find particularly meaningful
right now? During COVID, I rediscovered a lot of prayer books on my shelf, which was Daily Prayer for All Seasons, which is an Episcopal Church resource. It was published in 2012. And essentially, it's seasonal devotions with prayers, reflections, following the patterns of the prayer hours of the day. Instead, lauds, sects, matins, with more contemporary language. And this little prayer book accompanied through COVID, and it still is now. At different times in my life, I've used all sorts of different practices. When I was first ordained, I was a rigorous adherent to the daily offices, and that fell by the wayside. I tried different methods of contemplative prayer, and it's continued to change as I've went on. This is a good one that's working for me right now. One spiritual practice that I've got, Martha, as you know, my territory, it's Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario to Halifax, Nova Scotia. I spent a lot of time on the road.
Yeah.
That's my prayer closet, is that automobile. Move toward whatever ministry area or congregation or a set of congregations I'm going to visit. I pray for them and for their well-being and connect spiritually with them through that means of prayer as I'm going and as I'm leaving. It's a practice.
That's beautiful. That's really
I love it. It just helps me feel more spiritually close to people who are geographically dispersed.
Yeah, well, and it's great because it utilizes that time that could otherwise feel like, just onerous, right? Like having to get.
I love
from
the
A to B,
CBC, but I can only listen to it for so many hours.
Yeah, for our American listeners, the CBC is our Canadian Broadcast Corporation.
Our PBS.
Yeah, we get some pretty good content, but you're right. There's a limit. I think it's helpful, to hear from all of our different guests on the podcast about those spiritual practices, because as you say, there are times and seasons in our spiritual lives and our prayer lives, and it's good to hear what other people.
I used to really fret about it. Martha, that, like, particularly, as the offices, they just weren't doing it for me anymore. But does that mean I'm a bad Christian, a bad pastor? I'm going to stop doing that. Well, of course not.
Yeah.
There's a multitude of ways that one can pray and practice being in the presence of God. And one would think that it's quite natural and good to try and experience many ways of doing that.
Yeah, I agree. And to have that permission to do so, I think that's a big deal. I don't know about you, but I mean, my prayer practice just changed radically when I had children, because like starting the day in prayer just no longer felt like a remote possibility. But you have to find ways of staying spiritually grounded nonetheless. So, yeah. Okay. So, as I said earlier, I really wanted to have you on the podcast because you are retiring this spring.
Well, my successor will be elected at the end of June.
Summer.
We'll probably transition in September.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry, I'm not trying to rush you out.
And I'm still struggling with the R word, the retirement word. I'm going to stop doing this job. And I'm going to take a little break, and I expect I may look for another job.
Okay. All right. So we won't use the R word, but you are going to stop the job of being a bishop in the ELCIC, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada. And I just want to share with our listeners that you have been in this job for over 25 years. So that
we're into
27 years.
This is 26 this year. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's quite
They made a big
remarkable.
mistake and
That
just
is...
elected somebody too young.
Yeah, well, you must have definitely been extremely young when you were elected. So that is quite a long period of time to have a unique perspective on the life in the church and a unique perspective on leadership in the church. So this is really a podcast about helping to equip leaders in the church.
Yes.
I thought that you would be a great resource
Give it a
to
go,
weigh in
Martha.
on that. Okay. Well, for our listeners, let's start by just setting up how the office of the bishop works in the Evangelical Lutheran Church, because it is a bit different from the Anglican Church, and it's different from the Roman Catholic or Orthodox context. So can you just share with our listeners how the election process works and the terms that you have? Because that's a thing that might surprise some of our listeners, is that you have to be reelected as a Lutheran bishop. And then your authority structure is also a little bit different from some of these other denominations. So
Sure.
just set the framework.
Lutheran bishops are elected. They're elected in an electoral synod, a meeting of the synod. The synod includes the rostered ministers, so pastors, deacons serving under call, and lay representatives from the congregations. When I was first elected, it was for a 4-year term, and there were a succession of re-elections under 4 years. And recently there were constitutional changes to make it a 6-year term. So I'm currently ending a 6-year term. And those who are eligible for election are any pastor, priest that's on the clergy roster of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada or a full communion partner. So that's the Lutheran Church of Canada.
Right.
And now the Moravian Church of Canada. 3-way full communion here. The first ballot is a nominating ballot. So everybody named on that ballot goes forward to the next ballot. And then it goes on, and there's a whittling down that takes place, after the third, fourth. I think my initial election was maybe a 5th ballot.
But a lot of your subsequent re-elections have been one ballot. I mean, I'm pretty sure you were elected on the first ballot when I served in
God
the
bless
Lutheran Church.
People have been incredibly supportive, and that's felt like an affirmation. Yeah, but they've been first ballot re-elections, and that's in an open ecclesiastical ballot. They could have been elected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was shocked when my colleague turned to me and said that she refrained from writing down my name that time, but I was quite surprised as an Anglican priest to find out I could have been nominated too. Surprise.
The question of authority in the Lutheran Church, I've spent a lot of my time as a bishop has been working on matters of full communion, and so relationships with the Anglican Church of Canada. And then I did a stint with the Anglican Lutheran International Coordinating Committee. And so I've experienced episcopacy in those two different churches. At its essence, I think the authority that a Lutheran bishop would have, certainly what I felt I have, is certainly the authority that's inherent in the constituting documents of the church. You guys talk about canons, we talk about constitutions and bylaws. But that's only a very small part of it. The real authority is one of having the privilege and the right to be at meeting tables and meet with people. And it's the the inherent authority that comes from the office, and I would hope from having established trusting and loving relationships with people. That's authority that means something. That's not hammer authority. That's relational authority where people trust. And that's what I've worked at as job one since the beginning. I want to always be the trusted partner in the room.
Well, I believe that's why there have been those first ballots, honestly, that where you've been elected on the first ballot, because that is certainly very evident. And I mean, in my limited experience, it does seem to me that collaborative setup between the episcopacy and the congregations and pastors is more explicitly laid out in the Lutheran Church than in some of our other denominations, including having to be reelected. I mean, you do have to earn the trust and the collegial willpower of the people that you're working with in a way that isn't inherent in the Anglican or Roman Catholic traditions.
It's all about relationships, and the same as in your work as a priest, Martha. No, it's not much different. It's just a different context. But the skills that I used as a parish pastor, are the same things that I lean into in this role. And it's been a style of leadership that I've felt comfortable with, and I think it's worked for the synod.
Well, that really brings me to my next question, because, again, having the opportunity to work with you over the years, I would say that I've observed that you've really carried the weight of responsibility of the role of bishop with an overall sense of joy. I mean, that's been my impression and takeaway. That's not to say that there aren't challenges and difficulties, but I've always walked away with the impression that it is a responsibility that you bear with some gladness and gratitude.
I think I do too.
So
that's how I feel.
Yeah. So what would you say has been the most meaningful and life-giving?
Again, it's the relationships. I'm an inherently curious person. I like to learn about people's lives. I like to learn about their communities. I like to learn about their worlds. And so I always approach these relationships as a learner. And like parish visits, if I wasn't exercising those priestly functions, at the altar and at the pulpit regularly, and I'm somewhere every week, this job is undoable. And although there is joy in the synod office community, I've got wonderful colleagues, they're beautiful people, but the wellspring is those contacts with parish, with pastors, with deacons, with fellow bishops, full communion partners, the ecumenical work, that's the heart and soul of it. That allows me to, there aren't a whole lot of Sundays that I don't drive home with a big grin on my face. Now, there are a few where I come, my God, where would anybody go to this place? This is deadly. Those are quite few.
No, we won't name names.
No. But there's so many wonderful, good people that are, trying to live lives of discipleship in the church and that need to be encouraged and nurtured. And what better job can you have than to be able to do that?
Yeah, I know, truly. I mean, I say it all the time, but like, yes, we all have our days of feeling like the church would be so much easier anyway without all these people in it. but like, I would say that the overriding takeaway of ministry for me is how much my relationship with God has been strengthened and blessed and deepened because of the people that, bear witness to what this is all about. Walk
Absolutely.
with Jesus and to come through heartbreak and figure out like how to be more generous and like compassionate as a result. Like, it is amazing. And that word curiosity is really integral too.
Like, I get to experience all these different communities in different parts of the country. And it's just marvelous. Like, tomorrow I'm going to be in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, part of Lunenburg County.
Wow.
Last weekend I was in Petawawa up in the Ottawa Valley. There are unique things about these communities and the way people are, and the way people think, the way people talk. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And then you probably see some real common denominators as well in very different locations.
That orientation, Martha, I've watched a lot of clerics do their work. And to the ones that seem to experience joy in their ministry and whose ministries seem to go well, are always the ones that show the deepest and greatest love for the people with whom they're serving. And like, if you're always judging those people and questioning them or sometimes disdaining them, I don't know how you can be effective.
No, or like happy.
Yeah.
Like,
let us suffer absurdities, for that is to suffer one another. I think that's
great.
Chesterton.
That sounds like Chesterton. Yeah. So we touched on some of the change that you have seen and experienced in your own faith journey, but I want to get into the change that you've helped the church negotiate, because to go into leadership as a bishop in the 1990s is, a very different thing probably from 2024. Like, a lot of water has gone under the bridge in the last couple of decades. And you've been a primary leader in helping the church navigate change. So what would you name as kind of some of those biggest change factors that you have seen?
Probably the big one is the move towards becoming a more inclusive church, welcoming of LGBTQ+IA people into the church. That was a tough go, but it was. I remember my predecessor saying to me when I was elected, saying, the first 50, he was a long-term serving bishop too. My first 15 years were spent dealing with the question of Lutheran merger in Canada. He said, it's got to be all LGBTQ+IA. And it did turn out to be that. That was, for good reasons and not good reasons, that was front of the agenda pretty much every gathering we went to.
Yeah.
So,
it's true.
You want me to talk about how I tried to
Yeah. Like, what would be some strategy? Because you're right. I mean, that has been such a big topic in the Anglican Church too, on a national and diocesan level. And for a long time in my early years of ministry, it was extremely fraught, very divisive. There were lawsuits. There were, people fracturing away and joining other breakaway denominations. Yeah. So what kind of strategies did you?
I had come to the conclusion very early on that all this was going to happen. And then the question would be how to get there without then cause the least amount of harm in getting there. Harm to people in the LGBTQ+IA community, but also harm within the fabric of the church where people were legitimately conflicted about this. Right?
Yeah.
And so I figured the best posture that I could take is to be, which is always the best posture, is to just tell the truth and be honest. And so I was a very early advocate for these changes. But I assured the church that I respected their decision-making processes and would abide by them. And I was put in a few situations where I had to demonstrate that. Once I was interviewed on As It Happens, which for your American listeners is a CBC current affairs show. And I asked them, why do you want to interview me? And they said, well, because you're a pro-gay inclusion bishop, but you are about to discipline a congregation for going ahead and having an ordination, an unsanctioned ordination. So their story angle was like, how do you live between these? You're going to help people abide by the rules, but you want to change the rules. Well, I think that worked very well in our context. People understood that and they respected it. And I think it helped bring some people along in the conversation. So, and it was a recognition of where the church was then. Now, the good news, Martha, is, post 2012, our church took the steps, full inclusion, everything, ordination, marriage, yada, yada. Nobody has asked me a question about anything to do with LGBTQ+IA inclusion. It's not an issue anywhere, at least to the point where people want to talk to me about it. The Canadian society has changed. And I think quite rapidly. It really has. Certainly for those of us that want to change, it's never rapid enough, but it's happened. And likewise in the church.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a small town where I didn't think that, or where nobody was out, like publicly out. And I did not think I would see in my lifetime the sort of acceptance
I know, it's amazing.
that we've seen. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's beautiful.
I helped to install in that community. I know where you grew up, one of the largest churches in town, married lesbian cleric, who has been extremely well received. The call meeting, we have congregations issue calls to clerics, overwhelming support. Like, I served near that town too. That's where I was first ordained. I couldn't have imagined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't have imagined.
People have learned. People have matured. Thanks be to God.
Yeah. Thanks be to God. That's right. And, I do wonder, it sounds maybe like overly simple, but there's got to be a takeaway from that experience that can be sort of more generally applied to navigating change in the church as well. I mean, that honesty and transparency is probably just a good general rule of thumb.
And the leaders can't freak out. You got to be always regulating your own anxiety in these situations. Listen to people respectfully, even if they're saying things to you that are frankly quite awful in some ways, or if they're directing hurtful comments towards you, and just stay steady and keep your eye on where you're intending to go. And the goal was full inclusion. Now, we've done all the policy stuff, and we still got a ways to go in terms of actually implementing, but we've gone a whole long way.
Yeah, it's been, as you said, it felt at times like it was all going too slow, and now we've really gotten through it. So let's just broaden the lens a little bit here, and I'm interested in what you see as the biggest pitfalls of trying to be the church in the 21st century. And then kind of the follow-up question to that would be, what are the greatest pitfalls of leadership in the church in the 21st century?
So the biggest pitfalls that I've seen, and I've seen this one throughout the time that I've been serving as a bishop, is people continuing to hearken for an experience of church that was normative for about a 40-year period in the mid-20th century in America.
Yeah.
No.
Not a 400-year period.
No. And, but I think they're getting it now, that that's not coming back. That was an aberration. And you can actually cite some of the things that caused that aberration to happen. But it's not coming back.
Yeah. And by that, you're like really referring to that so-called golden era of the mainline congregations in North America, where we were just expanding at a rapid pace and putting down franchises in every neighborhood.
The church body that I was ordained was the Lutheran Church in America. And we were doing one new church plant every week. Well, it was the fastest growing denomination in North America. The presiding bishop of that church was on the front cover of Time magazine in 1956. Well, and most of it due to a birth rate, due to immigration patterns and post-war Africa.
Right.
It wasn't that they were particularly any more faithful in their discipleship, but it was a completely different context. So that's a real pitfall, but I'm seeing it fall away.
Well, we're getting further and further away from living memory of those.
And Martha, I was a kid at the tail end of that. You weren't. No.
I didn't experience that at all. Like, I've always experienced struggling.
I talk to younger clerics about this all the time, and the message that they're giving to me, and I think it's a damn good message. They're saying, change the narrative. Like, quit it with the hand-wringing and the whining. Stop it. Stop it.
Yeah.
We are the church now. We are the church in this context. We need to bring the same measure of creativity, vibrancy, fluidity, the ability to be nimble to our lives as previous generations have. Why should we be any different? But stop trying to replicate something that you're never going to replicate. And why would you?
Yeah. I think that's absolutely essential, is recognizing that the good old days aren't coming back, and good.
Let's face it, they may not have been particularly good.
Well, the thing I always say is that, you can, when you do even just the most nominal of historic kind of overviews of what has gone on in our churches, you recognize really quickly that in the midst of the the most booming of booming times, the seeds of decline were already being sown, right? Like the seeds of decline were being sown right in the midst of the good old days. Like
absolutely.
We're not going back there. And
I wonder whether we were ever intended to actually be there. Like it really did give us an altered sense of ourself. Like when the church is kind of wedded to a picture of what is normative status quo, bourgeois, middle class society, and there's really no difference in the values between the average, quote, Christian and the average citizen. Is that really what the body of Christ is all about? I think probably the more correct and effective posture is to see oneself as a remnant, as leaven within the dough. Of course, always seeking to enlist others to join us in supporting God's mission, but to be such a dominant institution society, I don't think it fits us.
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't. In any sort of intuitive way, really align with the cross of Christ to be all wound up in empire, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that, my younger colleagues are really helpful in reminding me. Because sometimes I can get into the whiny, poor us. And, I look at statistics and declining this, declining that. Well, you can take on that narrative as your primary lens, or you built another narrative that said that we are being put into a position where we actually have the capacity to be more creative, more nimble, do more interesting things, reshape our ministries in new ways. We're not stuck anymore.
Yeah. I think that's such an important reframe, because it is so easy, especially, for those of us who really love this church that we serve, and those of us who depend on like a salary from this church that we serve and so on, to just get so caught up in our job being about survival.
Yeah. And it's pretty hard to experience joy in your work if that's what it's all about.
Well, and it's also not a particularly compelling message for others, right? Like this ship is going down, like get on board because we need you.
That's right. Pay, pray, and obey, but especially pay.
Yeah. Yeah. And obey is a close second.
Yeah.
So we've talked about change, we've talked about joy. There have been challenges too. There have been real difficulties. What have you found to be most challenging in your tenure as bishop?
I guess I get discouraged sometimes, Martha, when people behave badly. Thanks be to God, I've had relatively limited experience with clergy misconduct, but some. And that's awful and that's hard, but it's clear what I need to do in those situations, and by God, I'm going to do it. But it's especially when you're talking people who are dear colleagues who you've respected, cared for. That's awful. People that in the church that are determined to fight and to be mean to one another. I'm dealing with, I think, about 3 of those right now, where the behavior is so harmful. to individuals, but also to the institution of the church that they claim to love so damn much. But they're really, really hurting it. That's been hard. I feel badly that we have largely failed at incorporating the generation of my children and grandchildren in life of the church.
Right.
Like one, and I'm talking wonderful people, many of whom have really wonderful and gospel-like, Christ-like values, but they really are particularly interested in connecting with our institutions in the ways that they see, and I guess we show are supposed to be normative. So that I count as a fail. But I'm hopeful that future generations of leaders are going to do that more effectively. My generation blew it.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly we're working against forces of secularism that are kind of not our fault as well, but there's definitely being generative peace.
It used to be, I always do town halls. Whenever I do these prayers, people ask the bishop questions. And how do we get the young people to go back to church? And so I've taken my standard answer. I said, I don't know, but why don't you ask them? We're all sitting at your Christmas table, your Thanksgiving table, your family birthday parties. Have you ever asked them? So I have had those conversations with my kids, and there's more of that needs to happen in more places.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The conversation has to be.
We've got to see the walls just being much more prominent. The whole concept, we have this thing in about membership, right? Well, nobody wants to be a member of anything anymore, much less your church. Like, they don't want to become members of parent-teacher associations or members. No.
Girl Guides, or
maybe you read Bowling Alone, Martha, with Putnam's, but it was a study of participation levels in all social organizations. Everyone's got exactly the same graph on their wall going with the depth, right?
Yeah,
but we have what, to my view, are quite rigid definitions of membership that I think can serve to exclude. I want multiple points of entry into this operation.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that leads me to my last question before we get into the rapid fire section to close off. Rapid fire, yeah. I'm glad that you're looking forward to that. So that's kind of one piece around membership and points of access and ways of engaging. What else would you say are your hopes for what the church will?
I would hope that we would do a much better job of engaging neighbors who are newcomers to this country of ours. We as Lutherans, we've tended to do a very poor job of that. And again, I count that one as a fail. We're doing a little better. We need to do a whole lot better. And we need to be a little self-critical of ourselves in terms of what are the things that characterize our lives and the way we do things that tend to be exclusionary to other people and to neighbors and to engaging them. So that would be something that I would see. And the question was challenges that I see or things that we ought to do.
What do you hope for? Yeah. What do you hope for the church?
The whole question is So I'm called and equipped to be a person. I sometimes tell people that doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to be an optimist. I do have hope. So you asked for hope. Yeah, I would hope that we would have worshiping assemblies that would be truly, truly inclusive, all of our neighbors. I used to do retreats at a place in the Ottawa Valley called Madonna House. It's essentially a lay apostolate. Remember going to one of the spiritual talks there where the presenter said, the church will never be authentically the church until such time as the poor are truly welcome amidst. I wonder, I don't think that the poor are truly welcome in most of our churches. We're essentially like straight up middle class and don't realize that we create barriers. I would hope and pray for an inclusive church. I would hope and pray for a church that is willing to be and actually seeks to be more conversant with science and technology. I think there's some awesome work that some scientists and theologians are doing on all sorts of stuff. I think most people in the general public see them as being diametrically opposed. But that's not the case at all. For heaven's sake, they're different approaches to the same task, pointing the same thing. When they link up, cool things can happen. I think that would be very cool. I want us to push the ecumenical agenda hard, Martha.
Well, and you've been a big champion of that, particularly
Anglican birth mother, adopted Lutheran, Baptist grandpa. I married a Mennonite, for God's sakes. I just think our continued rigorous holding on to denominational silos is baffling to people, and they just see us as competitors in a rapidly diminishing religious marketplace. I think we could be doing a whole lot more on that front. And in the world in which we live, to not be serious and consistently present in multi-faith spaces is unconscionable. We need to be talking to our neighbors of other faiths and more about them and with them together. I'm not supposed to be saying what I think anybody should be doing after I'm out of here, but
well, by the time this airs,
we'll be
the new bishop of you're going to be on to the next, and the new bishop will be elected, and so you can say what you want, and that person can chart their own course. I think
what are they going to do? Fire me?
Yeah. What are they going to do? I mean, everything that you identified, like the ingredients are all right there, right? Like they're all right there in the life, death, and ministry of Jesus. It's
absolutely,
it's all there.
And it's institutional stuff. We need institutions. I'm not an anti-institution. Heavens, I work for one. I've worked for one for a long, long time. I know that they're important. But my God, when they become petrified, they can be such impediments.
Yeah, they're in constant need of renewal, right? Like we have to always be breaking open those idols that institutions can so easily become, because it's so easy to serve
and
that.
That's why we need to talk to people that are a little more distant, a few steps away from those institutions, because you mentioned the word empire earlier. The empire seldom sees itself. It doesn't seem to have the capacity to do that. That others can help us.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Okay, well, with those pieces of hope and vision, we're going to take a quick break before we come back for those exciting rapid fire questions. Well, welcome back to Future Christian Podcast. We're going to close out with these rapid fire questions. So, Michael, if you were Pope for a day, what would be on your agenda?
Okay, I get to do this in one day. Okay, so I figure if I do these things, I will only be Pope for one day. They will get rid of me. Ordination of women immediately. Declarations of full communion with virtually all of the globally present Christian denominations. But if I could pull that now, no Pope has the authority to do that. But if I could.
You're going to be in communion with us,
that's
whether
right.
you like it or not.
Right. I would say, yeah, that's a good point. I would say you are welcome at our table, right? If you don't want us at your table, that's entirely up to you. But I would declare we are open.
I love that.
And I would open. How a church can function with limiting the exercise of gifts of almost half the world's population. I don't know about you in my church.
Yeah.
My God, if we didn't have women clerics, where would we be? It's going to become there will be more women in all positions of leadership in the church than men.
Yep. The tables are turning. So if you could bring a theologian or historical Christian figure back to life to sit around that table, have a conversation, who would it be?
I think I would like to have a conversation with Paul. He sometimes moves me deeply in great directions, and sometimes he baffles me. And now I might not enjoy that conversation very much, but I'd like to give it a go.
Well, I'm sure it would not be boring.
I'd probably like to have beers with Luther. That's
why not?
He did a lot of that. And
well, maybe Paul and Luther could sit down with both of them together.
Though Paul was, take a little wine for your stomach. Luther was he liked to drink.
What will history remember from this time and place?
Lord. I'm very, very concerned about the collapse of democratic institutions and civility in public life. And so I don't want this time to be remembered for a degradation of those things around the world, but I'm fearful of it.
Right. Yeah. Where can people find more about you?
I don't know. What?
TikTok, Instagram, YouTube.
My staff several years ago said, "Come on, Bishop, you got to do at least one social media thing." Right? So you show them all to me.
Okay.
And Twitter was the easiest one. So I'm on X at Michael Pryse.
Okay.
And there's lots of YouTube stuff too. And you can Google me if you wish, although there's nothing of great import anyway there.
Well, I would beg to disagree, but it has been really such a privilege having this time to sit down and talk with you. It's great to tap into your wisdom and your experience, but I think the biggest thing that I appreciate about you, Michael, is that love that you talked about right at the outset for your people and for this church that we serve.
You gotta love them. They piss you off sometimes, but that's when you really gotta love them. It's easy to love when everything's going tickety-boo and wise. The real test of your love is when times are tough.
I think Jesus said something about that, about it's easy to, love your friends, but how about those enemies? You gotta love them too.
Thank you very much, Martha. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you today.
Thank you, Michael. We always end with a word of peace, so may the peace of Christ be with you.
And also with you.
Thanks for joining us on the Future Christian Podcast. To learn more about Lauren or the podcast, visit future-christian.com. One more thing before you go. Do us a favor and subscribe to the podcast. And if you're feeling especially generous, leave a review. It really helps us get the word out to more people about the podcast. The Future Christian Podcast is a production of Torn Curtain Arts and Resonate Media. Our episodes were mixed by Danny Burton, and the production support is provided by Paul Romig-Levitt. Thanks, and go in peace.